issue that could be problematic is the weather.
Right.
And there are many different types of weather. So you have surface weather, which is where the rocket actually is. You have kind of atmospheric weather, so getting from Florida to Earth, to low Earth orbit. And then, of course, you have in-space weather, which most people on Earth never think about. But only last night, I mean, talk about bad luck, there was a major solar flare, which is creating kind of space weather impacts far above the Earth atmosphere that will kind of, interrupt communications and satellites and all that kind of stuff.
So you can't go if that is happening, clearly. I mean, this is quite difficult then for the crew, isn't it? Because they're desperate to go, but they're, keeping their fingers crossed like everybody else. What will they be going through at the moment?
Oh, well, I'm not an astronaut, but I can imagine that they are, the technical role means that they will right now be going through, checks and kind of all of the training that they've done over many years. Now, this is an extremely exciting flight for technical reasons and economic and geopolitical reasons, but also this crew are, 4 of the best astronauts that are in the astronaut corps at the minute. It's extremely exciting. Reid Wiseman, the commander, used to be the chief of the astronaut office. Two of the astronauts actually trained together in the same astronaut class. Then you have a Canadian astronaut as well. So 3 of the 4 are very, very well-seasoned test fighter pilots. One of them has been at NASA for many years before she was even an astronaut as an engineer. So these are extraordinarily well-trained astronauts, pilots, engineers. And so there isn't a better combination of 4 people to crew this mission.
Yeah, we are expecting an update at 10 o'clock. You can see a QR code there if you want to click on it. And just finally, why do we need to go back to the moon? It's incredibly expensive. It's incredibly dangerous. Why do we need to do it?
Yeah, you're right. It's not cheap and it is dangerous. I guess, one of the issues right now, or not issue, but, one of the targets of this mission, it's not the final destination to go to the moon. The final destination is to go to Mars. This is one step of many. So this is really exciting because once we are able to do Artemis II mission, we can go to Artemis 3, 4, 5. Once we kind of establish this presence on the lunar surface, we can then use this as a vital and much needed stepping stone to go to Mars. So for many people in the space industry, like myself, Mars is the ultimate goal. And this is a very important milestone that is going to enable us to get there.
Yeah, when we next see you, I'll ask you why we need to go to Mars, but I'm afraid we're out of time. Sinead, great to see you. We'll keep our fingers crossed for Wednesday.
Perfect,
yeah,
thank you.
Sinead O'Sullivan, Professor of Aerospace Engineering. And that's it from the world. Coming up next, it's The Wrap with Barbara Serra, as US President Donald Trump said today he wants a deal with Iran or he'll obliterate their oil wells and their power and desalination plants.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Tonight on The Wrap, Starmer appeals for help. He tells business leaders summoned to Downing Street that the government cannot tackle the economic fallout from the Iran war by itself.
This is going to have to be a joint effort. The government can't do it on its own. You can't do it on your own. We're going to have to work together on this, which is why I wanted to have the conversation here.
A British couple detained in Iran on spying charges tell Sky News that they need the Prime Minister to intervene to get them out.
Tell me, Mr. Keir Starmer, what exactly are you doing? Why can't you take control of this situation and free two innocent people?
Another scandal at the BBC as Radio 2 DJ Scott Mills is sacked over his personal conduct. Can the corporation keep surviving crisis after crisis? Plus, the final countdown. NASA begins the last phase of preparations for its first manned mission to the moon in half a century. We will discuss the day's biggest stories with Dame Penny Mordaunt and Rory Bremner. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's papers, including coverage of the BBC sacking of Scott Mills. Good evening, Penny, Rory, welcome both.
Hello.
Now, Downing Street War Summit this afternoon saw the Prime Minister asking business leaders for help in minimising the economic impact of the Iran war on the UK. Penny, opening thoughts from you.
This looks to me like an event to hang a press release off. Business has been doing a huge amount from even before this conflict started. And I think if the government was serious about helping them help consumers, they would stop hitting them with taxes and they would ease regulation on them.
Rory?
Well, when he said he'd asked them for help, I assumed he was just going to ask if they had any jobs going in May. But I've got the head of Shell, I've got the head of BP, I've got the head of Centrica. And if they can't give me any energy, then I've got no chance at all.
We'll discuss it in more detail, obviously, during the programme, because Sir Keir Starmer told the bosses of some of the country's biggest energy, shipping and finance firms that the government could not shoulder all of the burden of the problems facing people across the country.
Probably uppermost in their minds at the moment is energy bills, petrol, and also food prices. This is going to have to be a joint effort. The government can't do it on its own. You can't do it on your own. We're going to have to work together on this, which is why I wanted to have the conversation here.
Well, the RAC said today that petrol and diesel prices have reached levels unseen since the end of 2022. It says the cost of filling up a family car is now more than £10 higher than at the start of the Iran war just a month ago. So how serious is the situation and how reliant are we on imports? Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has been looking at the numbers.
Now, if you've been to one of these recently, to your local petrol station, you probably noticed two things. First of all, petrol prices have gone up a lot. Secondly, diesel prices seem to be going up much faster than petrol prices, raising the question, why is that? Well, first of all, you're right. Look, this is petrol prices just recently. They have gone up pretty sharply. But look at diesel. We're going back a few years here. Look at diesel prices. They are up even more sharply. So diesel's up 28%, petrol up 15%. So it's basically double the speed of the increase. This story is kind of a slightly long-winded story, but it kind of begins in a way with this man, Gordon Brown, when he was Chancellor, and a policy he announced to basically encourage people to buy diesel cars. It was kind of a tax break in 2002. But also this, the refineries in the UK and the fact that quite a lot of them have shut down. So those two things together, on top of the war, help explain what's going on right now. So first to Gordon Brown. So a few years ago, kind of back at the turn of the millennium, the vast majority of cars that people were buying were petrol cars. Then Gordon Brown brought in these tax changes that basically encouraged people to buy diesel cars. Everyone thought they were better for the environment. And then look what happens. The red line is diesel. Diesel kind of car purchases went up and up and up, actually to be higher than petrol by about 2015. Then everyone realised, oh, it turns out actually maybe diesel cars aren't quite so good for the environment. Dieselgate happened. And then you can see the diesel line went down. But the key thing about this is, as a result of that, there are quite a lot of diesel cars in the UK, partly because of tax policy going back years and years and years. We were encouraged to buy them. And the other thing to note is, well, we've got all these refineries in the UK, But most of them are designed primarily to make petrol. So they take crude oil and turn it into petrol. And also, they've been starting to shut down. So even last year, that was refineries a few years ago. Last year, Grangemouth and Lindsey refineries shut down. So now we only have 4 of them left. And you put those two things together and look at how much petrol we're making versus how much we need. Basically, the line, anything above the line shows we're making more than 100% of what we need domestically. Petrol, we are kind of self-sufficient, technically self-sufficient. You know, we do bring in a fair bit and export a fair bit, but self-sufficient for petrol. But for diesel, we used to be. But then, look, fewer refineries, more demand, and that line went down. That's the key point. We're dependent on imports for diesel. This is where we used to get our imports from, most of them from Russia. Obviously, that's changed with sanctions coming in. But now, most of it comes from the US. But the key thing to note is this. Look, if we look at the breakdown of where we're getting diesel from, 12% of it comes from the Gulf. That's a problem now, obviously. You've got countries like Belgium and the Netherlands, their refineries there, they're dependent on the Gulf as well. They're taking the oil from the Gulf and refining it. And then you've got somewhere like India, which is actually getting a lot of oil from Russia. So you see, kind of 60%, actually more than 60% of these areas that we typically get diesel from are affected by what's going on right now, affected by geopolitics. So put all of that together and it helps explain why it's really tight for all fuels at the moment, but particularly for diesel.
Let's go to Rory and Penny in the studio. Rory, if I can start with you. I mean, you look at those figures, it's worrying. And actually, we're going to look at the papers later, but the Daily Telegraph has a statement by the IMF, a warning that that we actually faced the biggest hit from the Middle East energy crisis.
Yeah, and it's quite a desperate sort of state of affairs, really, for the government. I think I'm not surprised that they're sort of asking for help from the companies that are sort of on the front line of it. I mean, there's a limit to what the government can do, really, because Rachel Reeves has a £20 billion shortfall as it is. That's about £500 or £600, I think, for every household. And again, you've got a perfect storm, just at a time when they're supposed to be cutting domestic fuel bills. Price of energy around the price of energy around the world has soared up, and I think they've got little room to move.
Penny, it was such a strong phrase from Starmer. The government cannot do this on its own. It's quite an admission.
Well, I mean, the businesses will know this. Businesses have been coping with this. The average number of attacks that takes place outside of a conflict on our shipping in the Straits is 500 a year. So business has been doing its bit for a long time. Government's role is to keep those shipping lanes open. We don't have our mine hunters available. There's in the papers it's talking about Bay-class ships being deployed to do this job. They're made of metal. Mine hunters aren't. And it's a bad idea to stand on something made of metal when you're mine sweeping. That's government's job. It's government that is not holding up its end of the bargain. And this is why you've got to invest in these capabilities. 70% of everything your viewers will have touched today, food, fuel that they use, all sorts of things, are imported to this country via sea. So if we don't have a navy that can keep our interests secure, we're going to be in trouble fast.
Well, it's been a busy day in Downing Street, of course. Let's cross to Downing Street now and speak to our political correspondent, Alexandra Rogers, who is there for us. Alexandra, busy day, and it's going to be busy tomorrow as well, with the Prime Minister chairing a Cobra meeting.
Yes, very much so. The government wants to be seen to be taking action, summoning all of those big energy bosses here in Downing Street today. We haven't learned much in terms of new policy or new announcements, but we have had a readout from Downing Street, which does reiterate much of what the Prime Minister said. But there is a line in that I'm going to read, and it says, the overall message remains clear. The UK government will continue to help bring this war to an end as soon as possible. That is the quickest and best way to ease the economic impact it is having across the globe. Now, I imagine opposition parties will think that that is wishful thinking on behalf of the government, especially considering Donald Trump's latest rhetoric. And they will also say that the government could do things now to help ease the burden on working people, such as scrapping VAT and green levies on energy bills, and also scrapping that planned fuel duty hike in September.
Alexandra Rogers with the latest there from Downing Street. Alexandra, thank you. And that story makes the front page of the newspaper with the headline, PM meets UK fuel bosses as prices rise at the pumps. We're going to bring you a full look at the papers in about 25 minutes. But first, a British couple who have been imprisoned in Iran for more than a year on spying charges have told Sky News that the Prime Minister must intervene in their case. Craig and Lindsay Foreman, who deny the charges, have been speaking to my colleague, Sarah Jane Mee.
Kind of start getting used to the noises of the various missiles and bombs that hit, and you always worry when you feel them and the vibration.
Lindsay, what has life been like in the prison since war broke out? Have you been treated any differently?
There are those that support the action, support the war, perhaps support the British, and there's those that don't. And it's bringing out the Iranian nationalism, so it's quite difficult. It's my perception that I think there is more animosity towards the British, and that being me, than there was before the war. So I made my peace with death within maybe 48 hours of the reality of the bombs hitting and the fact that we could be struck, and that I've led a good life.
It's, since the war, it's the tensions within the salon here have, heightened, and I was snoozing earlier and got woken up by yet another fight, so the fights are becoming daily.
With rising anti-West sentiment in the prison, do you get the sense that that is growing and you could well be a target?
Could be. You never know. Like I say, you can't predict the war, and you can't predict what's going to happen within these walls. So,
on your family's behalf, what would you like to ask the Prime Minister? What would you like to say to him?
Tell me, Mr. Keir Starmer, what exactly are you doing? Why can't you take control of this situation and free two innocent people?
And we've had a response from Downing Street to that interview. It says, "We've made it clear that Craig and Lindsay's incarceration is unjustified and appalling. Officials and diplomats have been providing consular assistance, and the ambassador to Tehran has visited them in prison. We will continue to work to safely return them to the UK, with the Foreign Secretary meeting their family to show our support." Penny, the phrase that really stayed with me was Lindsay Foreman saying that she's made her peace with death. I mean, it's such an awful situation she's in.
Yes, a terrible ordeal to start with, being taken like this, and they are hostages, even though that term isn't being used by the government for perhaps good reasons. They clearly are hostages and will be going through a terrible ordeal. To then have this conflict layered on top of that and the vulnerability that they will have is just terrible, and terrible for their family. I mean, it is worth stating, I think, and reiterating that Iran is not a safe place to travel to. It's very difficult when people have family there, but it is, I advise anyone not to go.
What did you make of the interview, Rory?
Well, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? I mean, as you say, I mean, but also the fact that where they are now, the buildings are shaking from the bombs that are being dropped around them. So, I mean, you think back to Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. She was in prison for 6 years, wasn't she? It took 6 years, and eventually the government paid something like £400 million to Iran, which was a debt that was owed to Iran anyway. And I mean, Iran presumably, as you say, holding them as hostages, and they're going to want something before they release them. And we can only imagine what that price would be.
I mean, there are pawns now as well as prison.
It's standard operating procedure for this terrorist state. And that is why if you go there, you are making yourself incredibly vulnerable.
I mean, it also shows how the war is just spiralling out of control. France has tonight demanded an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council after the deaths of 3 peacekeepers in Lebanon. It comes as Israel expands its incursion into Lebanon in its fight against the militant group Hezbollah. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford is in the capital, Beirut, and she sent us this update.
Yet more ambulances are bombed to bits in South Lebanon. And there are fears that more Israeli strikes will follow, so they move quickly. This is daily life for first responders in Lebanon right now. The Israeli military is bombing emergency crews and their vehicles relentlessly, claiming without providing evidence that ambulances are being used to transfer weapons and Hezbollah militants are disguised as medics. No paramedic feels safe right now, and yet never have the emergency crews been more vital. Multiple groups, including some of the world's best known, have been attacked, yet they all categorically deny providing anything but humanitarian help, and many are subjected to repeated bombings.
When you have airstrikes and you have to respond, and perhaps you'll get another airstrike. So you will wait, you don't wait, you have to respond, you have to help, you have to save lives. This is very risky. So it becomes more dangerous and more serious, but we have to continue. We have to give hope to the people who need us.
The situation's becoming more and more dangerous for UN troops working in the devastated south too. When we were last with them, they told us then of coming under fire. It's got a whole lot worse. They've come under attack twice within the last 24 hours. 3 peacekeepers have been killed in separate incidents and several critically wounded. UN troops are protected under international law, and the UN chief has urged all to ensure their safety. But those pleas and his condemnations are having little impact. Israeli forces are pounding the capital as well as the south, ratcheting up bombings after the Israeli Prime Minister said he wants a bigger chunk of Lebanese land for what he's calling Israel's security buffer zone to protect against Hezbollah rocket fire. But the Lebanese casualties are rising by the day. These are the Ali al-Jabal daughters with their mother Maya. 3 of them and their mother were critically wounded after an Israeli airstrike and are still in hospital. Zainab, the baby of the group, seen here in pink on the right, didn't survive.
And you can see more of that family story in Alex's full report, available across the Sky News digital platforms. Penny, let me start with you here. I mean, we can see not only the war escalating, but there's lots of seemingly different wars, and Israel now saying that it's going to expand its invasion of Lebanon.
Yes, well, you've got different players with different objectives, and it's quite difficult to actually get to the bottom of what's really happening. The US has got a stated set of objectives, but clearly at the start of this, it was as much about China as it was anything in the region. And there is, I think, a kind of break in trust between nations in the regions that have good relationships with the IDF and with Mossad, but are perhaps less trusting of the Israeli leadership right now and what it is planning on doing. So that, I think, is one of the most disturbing situations that we find ourselves in at the moment, is just that breach of trust and lack of certainty about going forward. There does look like there's going to be talks in the next few days. There are 4 nations that are facilitating that, and they say they're going to go ahead in the next few days, no matter what Trump and Iran are saying.
Yeah, just a quick, I mean, even if, and it's a big if, we see a de-escalation between the US and Iran, though, we're seeing so many other almost side wars that doesn't necessarily mean that Israel will de-escalate in Lebanon.
Absolutely. And it's also in Iran's interest that it keeps hostilities going. It wants to inflict as much pain on everyone else as it possibly can. So I think we're in for quite a long time of this, and the Strait's not opening up anytime soon.
Absolutely. And forgive me, let me just read something, then I'll come to you, because President Trump insisted today that he wants a deal with Iran, or he will obliterate the country's power plants, oil wells and desalination plants. Well, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, told reporters tonight that President Trump has offered Tehran a once-in-a-generation opportunity for a deal. Let's listen.
Permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions and stop acting as the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. If the Iranians reject this golden opportunity, the greatest military in the history of the world continues to stand by to provide President Trump with every option available to ensure this regime continues to pay a grave price. One way or another, Iran will no longer have the credible ability to threaten the United States or our allies, which is, of course, the overall objective and mission the president set out when he launched Operation Epic Fury.
Rory.
Well, I mean, this is a war, as you said, it's going off in all sorts of different directions, and partly out of the unpredictability of Donald Trump. I mean, I wonder if he's to say, you know, it's very unpredictable what's happening, and you know, And a lot of people don't know what's going to happen next, and you know why that is? Because I don't know what's going to happen next either, and we really don't. And I mean, it's a lot of armchair generals sort of saying, well, of course, we could have anticipated about the Straits of Hormuz. But there are people in the Pentagon whose job it is and have been wargaming for many years and months on this. And either he's not listened to them or he's got in very, very deep. And he's got a number of options now, none of which are particularly good. Either he's going to keep bombing, as he said before, or he's going to... It looks like we've now got 2,500, 3,000 Marines in the area, whether he decides he's going to actually take over Karg Island. And if that's the case, how do you hold on to Karg Island? Or I think it's interesting because he did this Truth Social thing. He said, the United States is in serious discussions with a new and more reasonable regime in capital letters. And one of his off-ramps is to say, well, we wanted regime change, we've got regime change. And I wonder if he's sort of like hinting at the fact, well, regime change, that gives me one reason to say, we've won that. But very importantly, I think the thing is that this idea that he thinks that if you're the weaker nation, that you will be defeated. But now all a weaker nation has to do is to prolong the war, like Ukraine is doing with Russia, and like Iran is doing with the United States, until the stronger country finds it's no longer sustainable.
Penny, what do you think?
Well, the Iranians have put a counter offer on the table that Trump's produced this 15-point plan. They've got a 5-point plan, which involves everyone saying sorry and them being compensated for what's happening. So, I mean, there doesn't look like they're remotely close to coming to some kind of negotiated end to this, although the talks are going ahead. But also, we've just been talking about that particular region in the Middle East. Meantime, Russia has started to become much more aggressive, and it's kicking off. So this I mean, it's not just very unpredictable things that are happening all over the place in the Middle East. It is much broader than that. And China is in trouble as well, because China is disproportionately negatively affected by what's happening in the shipping issue.
There's a really good piece by William Hague in the Times tomorrow where he's picking up on Russia is in on this because Russia is providing intelligence to Iran and will do, presumably with Karg Island, is because they've got their satellites, and Zelensky has told the Americans that he knows the Russians have been photographing targets which the Iranians hit the next day.
Helping them target American troops.
Exactly. And Trump is sort of almost turning a blind eye to that. Meanwhile, in Ukraine is providing intelligence on how to shoot down the very drones that Ukraine has been having to deal with, because Russians have been using Iranian drones. Now Iran is using Russian drones. So this is when people say about World War III, so many nations are getting involved in this.
And I think it was Rubio a few days ago that was specifically asked about the Russia threat and said, well, their intelligence, even if they pass it to Iran, doesn't damage American assets there, which is an interesting and slightly strange thing to say, but I guess they just don't want to address the Russia issue just yet. Let's focus on something a little bit lighter. Before we move on from the US, let's take a look at what is happening in Florida. And NASA is holding a briefing after the beginning of the official countdown to the launch of the Artemis II mission to the moon, which is due to lift off on Wednesday, maybe. We'll keep an eye on that and bring you the best of that news conference a little later this hour. But first, the BBC is facing another crisis. The Radio 2 presenter Scott Mills has been sacked over allegations about his personal conduct. The radio DJ, who also presents some of the corporation's Eurovision coverage, had been the BBC's 11th highest paid star. Sky's Molly Malone has more.
Radio 2 star Scott Mills has been sacked by the BBC following allegations about his personal conduct. What do we know so far? Well, the details are limited. A BBC spokesperson simply saying, while we do not comment on matters relating to individuals, we can confirm Scott Mills is no longer contracted and has left the BBC. He went off air on Tuesday the 24th of March saying back tomorrow, but the following morning, DJ Gary Davies presented the show. This is a significant and seemingly sudden move, the BBC sacking one of their biggest stars. He's had a career at the corporation going back decades, at Radio 1, 5 Live, and then most recently taking over hosting the flagship breakfast show on Radio 2 last year. News of Mills's sacking led the midday bulletin on Radio 2. Jeremy Vine, who presented the show immediately after the announcement, said this.
Obviously, I was taken aback by that opening story to the news. I had not heard anything about it until 17 minutes ago when it was on the BBC website, and I only have the information that was given to you in the bulletin. I have nothing more, that it was allegations about Scott Mills's personal conduct which have led to him being sacked. I have no more than that.
Mills is a prominent figure and their 11th highest paid star, according to the corporation's last annual report, earning over £350,000. The director of music, Lorna Clark, said in a statement to staff that the news will be sudden, unexpected, and therefore come as a shock, going on to say that she felt it was important to share this news at the earliest opportunity. And that's key. As a corporation which has faced numerous scandals over the years, they want to be seen to get ahead when it comes to allegations relating to one of its biggest names.
Well, let's talk about this with our guests. Rory, what do you make of it? Another scandal for the BBC.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't, I think, the BBC. I think they've been criticised in the past for taking too long. And if you think about Greg Wallace or Hugh Edwards, in this case, they seem to have acted very quickly. But I'm surprised, because we don't know, of course, what the allegations are. We're told it's historic. But I'm surprised that he hasn't released a statement, because what's happened is you get a vacuum, of course, when people pile in with different speculation. We don't know, and he hasn't released a statement. But again, I mean, like the Mail I see tomorrow, it says BBC crisis, and it's always used as a stick to beat the BBC. I mean, it has 22,000 employees, you know, the vast majority of who work, you know, really hard and conscientiously, and you will have presenters who are in the public eye, and where there's a hit TV show, where there's a hit, there will be people looking for scandal, and there will be scandal, but that doesn't mean that the BBC is institutionally scandal-ridden. I think there are individuals, but in this case, as I say, we don't know what it is.
I mean, it's quite something for the entry of the interim DG, whose first week it was.
Yes, well, I mean, the Mail is saying that this sacking was the outgoing DG sort of clearing the decks. But I think where the Beeb has come under criticism in the past, it is because of how it has dealt with these things. They've been, you know, eked out over, you know, months and months and months, or people given massive payoffs or put on gardening leave with a massive salary still being paid to them. This looks like it's been dealt with swiftly. And I mean, it does look to be something quite serious. Obviously, we don't have the details, and there hasn't been a prosecution.
Yeah, and like Roy was saying, Scott Mills hasn't commented himself on this. So we'll see how it develops. It's certainly in the papers, and coming up next, we're going to take a first look at what's making the front pages of tomorrow's papers. Stay with us.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Welcome back. Time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's papers. Well, the Eye has comments from the Prime Minister urging business leaders to help limit the economic fallout of the Iran war on its front page. The Express reports on calls for the government to help tackle rising fuel costs as a result of the conflict in the Middle East. The Guardian leads on threats from US President Donald Trump to, quote, obliterate Iran's power plants if they do not agree to peace terms soon. The Mail reports on the sacking of radio DJ Scott Mills from the BBC, calling it another crisis for the Broadcasting Corporation. Meanwhile, The Telegraph says the Prime Minister has issued a 48-hour ultimatum to doctors, saying if they don't call off their planned strikes, then 4,000 new jobs will be axed. The Metro has the story of a man who died after blowing up his own home following an £80 increase to his rent. The Financial Times reports on a French AI startup raising funds to build more data centres across Europe. And let's look at some of these front pages with Penny and Rory. Penny, let me start with you. The Eye focusing on that meeting that the Prime Minister had with business leaders. I mean, obviously a very difficult situation. I guess Keir Starmer wanting to be seen to be doing something.
I think it was. I mean, anything that happens around the cabinet table, even cabinet meetings these days, are about the press release that follows it. It's not actually anything new happening. And I've actually been receiving some of the intelligence reports that have been shared across some of the businesses that he had around that table today. And they have been doing a huge amount to try and build resilience, to try and get through the straits. One of the firms that he had in today, in the reports this morning I received, actually have given up trying to get through the straits now. And so I think too, there wasn't a lot of understanding from that meeting, I thought, from the PM about what business actually has had to be dealing with. And it's government's job to create the security for them to do their job. And we haven't done that.
But so what do you think he means when he says, you know, we're all in it together and I need help, effectively?
Well, I think he's looking to try and shift focus away from him. I mean, what we urgently need are some things in the Straits that will actually increase the chances of shipping getting through. Usually on an average day, you have about 138 ships go through those straits. At the weekend, we had 9 go through. So there's this incredible backlog, which is having a huge negative impact on all kinds of transits, not just fuel, all sorts of freight, and it's really hurting business. It's wiping out in some cases any growth that businesses had for this year. So, you know, they are doing their bit. They've been doing it a long time. The government has not been doing its bit, which is to make sure we've got proper mine hunting capability out there, and that we're funding the resilience that we need at home as well.
I don't think you'll be able to open the Straits of Hormuz militarily. I mean, it's going to have to be by some kind of negotiation, unless you commit thousands and thousands of troops to, as you said, actually, because you've got to. People are talking about Gallipoli and the Strait of Dardanelles, and that cost thousands of lives because you've got to have people on the shorelines, or even further in Iran where the drones and missiles are coming from. It's incredibly difficult. But back home, this is the cost of the war hitting back home. And it's extraordinary because the two things are happening at the same time. As I say, we're cutting domestic fuel bills at a time when the oil price has gone up 60%. And also we're talking about how people can cut back and maybe sort of drive more sensibly or whatever at a time when we're facing the biggest bank holiday for 4 years, they're saying, and the amount of traffic that's going to be on the roads. So it's an extraordinary sort of cognitive dissonance almost between the two things.
And as Starmer said, it's not our war, and that's a reminder in The Guardian front page there. Trump threat to obliterate all Iranian power plants. I mean, ultimately, it's not a war of the prime minister's decision or desire, and it's Trump that keeps on ratcheting up the pressure.
So yes, and I mean, I think Trump is saying that to try and force the Iranians to the negotiating table, but we could be faced with a whole raft of situations that are not in our control and not our fault. You know, the pandemic, for example, and the huge negative economic impact that had. And that's the reason why we, even if we're not intending to initiate a conflict ourselves, have to be prepared to deal with the effects of one. And it is about resilience at home. Rory's right, you're quite limited in what you can do, but you can, and we have for years had capabilities out there. It's one of the things the Royal Navy is got particular knowledge and specialisms in, is enabling transit through the Straits. But we don't have the kit that's always been there now.
I did have this idea that Trump had got a call sort of saying, you know, our Navy has been decimated. We've only got sort of 1 or 2 ships left. Our leader is incapacitated. We don't know who will take over. And we've lost the support of all our friends and allies. And Trump saying, well, Keir, I can't help you on those. It's quite an extraordinary thing. I mean, this is a war of choice, of course, but it does seem to be getting out of hand.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you were mentioning the Easter getaway, of course, later on this week. Daily Express, their front page, Labour urged to help Britain's drivers now. A bit the point that you were making, Penny. You know, we can't control what goes on around the world, but you know, Keir Starmer being pressured to help people here now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you. I've always been a fan of holding down fuel duty. If you halve VAT on fuel at the pump, that's not going to exacerbate inflation. It's a sensible thing to do, and you help everyone. You help families, you help businesses, because
the government hasn't really expressed a view one way or another on whether they're going to.
Well, they're being urged by the leader of my party, but also. All sorts of stakeholders, including Ed King from the AA, to axe their planned tax increases on fuel at the pump, and I think they should do it. It would help everyone.
Is it 53p a litre at the moment, isn't it? Something like that. So that's the 53p a litre on tax
on duty, or VAT.
I think the duty, isn't it? The tax.
I think
and 5% VAT on oil. The things that they could cut, possibly.
Yeah, it would. I mean, it would be hugely beneficial to do this.
Also, communication. I think the other thing. I think if there are things that the public could be doing, should the government? I think there is a sense that we've underestimated this coming down. That we've underestimated the seriousness of it, and I think maybe there are things that the government could be communicating because people want to do. Well, say, okay, well, what can I do if we're going to be in this situation, which looks like it's going to spread out from weeks into months?
Yeah.
And what can we do as individuals? Maybe it's time with the government saying, well, you know, these are things that we could all do, and the government will play its part.
It'll be interesting to see how that develops in the next, certainly, weeks and days. Let's go to The Guardian now. Different story here. Scott Mills sacked by the BBC over claims about conduct. We always hear these stories that are always sort of seen in the line of Penny, another scandal for the BBC. What impact do you think this will have, for example, on charter renewal, if any?
Well, I think because they have appeared to have dealt with this swiftly, I don't think this story will run as a negative story against the BBC. I think that journalists will be much more interested in what's actually gone on, and they'll be pursuing, you know, trying to get the backstory to what's happened with him and whatever these incidents have been. But I suspect that the criticism of the BBC will be short-lived. There's a lot of other things going on in the world.
There are indeed. Yeah. One of them is doctor strike, but you can talk about this for a bit, Rory.
Well, I was going to say, Scott, I mean, there seems to be a certain amount of, we do not know what it is, but funnily enough, on social media, I mean, he's very popular, and
I think it's the most listened breakfast radio show.
That's right. So there didn't seem to be. I think there's a lot of surprise and shock from people that seem to know. When it was Greg Wallace or Hugh Edwards, you know, people sort of say, well, we've known this or we've seen this for years. There hasn't been that kind of response. Yeah. What there has been people piling in on the BBC. But as I say, in the absence of a statement from Scott Mills, there is a vacuum into which people will pile, and we need to hear from him.
Let's look at another story from page of the Daily Telegraph, a story that we haven't been talking about that much because there's so much other news, but actually potentially it's quite a big one, and that is a 6-day strike by doctors, which should start Tuesday after Easter. And now Starmer saying he's giving them an ultimatum. Penny, what's the story here?
Well, I think this is not going to work, is my assessment. I mean, threatening to not create some new jobs is not really going to, I think, matter to people pushing for a strike. I mean, the government came in, it gave the union what it wanted and said, let's draw a line under this and let's get the NHS back on its feet again. And they've not done that. And I think it's going to be extremely difficult for them now to dissuade them from what is a very unreasonable course of action, I think.
What do you think, Rory?
Well, I mean, I don't know how much sympathy there is now for this strike. As Wes Streeting has said, that the doctors have done on average 52,000 a year, which is 12,000 more than 3 years ago. And basic pay for the highest earners has increased to 77,000, up from 73, and could rise to more than £100,000 a year, including overtime, weekends and night shifts. Now, of course, you know how important doctors and nurses are to society in general. As opposed to comedians, for example. But I don't know, they might be with everything else that we've been talking about, the cost of living and the war. You have to wonder if they're going to get sympathy at this time.
Well, sympathy had been decreasing for them, actually, even before the war, so it might be even worse now. Let's see, a Telegraph, a story about car finance and the car finance scandal. It's surprising that it's quite small, again, in a sort of less... news-heavy time, it might have had more space. So millions in line for car finance payouts, and it's this car finance scandal now, Penny.
Yes, I mean, this has been rumbling for quite some time, and really eye-watering numbers of people affected. They've done some maths for those that they think will apply for compensation. But yes, it's a story that has been running for some time, and I think it's about £7 billion that they're expecting it to finally cost them.
I think the average payout they think is going to be £829.
Yeah, I think that this is what the FCA sort of, I think they wanted to sort of try and put some sort of cap on it because, interestingly, I mean, what the finance companies were doing, they were actually following the guidelines, and it was some individuals who took them to court, to the Court of Appeal, and it was the Supreme Court that ruled that actually the finance companies weren't doing anything wrong. I mean, I think...
And then they changed the law because of that.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think the claims companies, you know, which call the ambulance chasers or the claims companies, they saw this as the next PPI scandal, which saw, I think, £38 billion being paid out in compensation. So the FCA thought we don't want to have another of these. So that it's been through the courts. And unusually, what the FCA has done, they've acted retrospectively. They changed the law retrospectively, which meant that a lot of companies that had followed the law could be facing huge bills. And I think the FCA just wanted to draw a line.
Not everyone happy, of course, with the situation as it is now.
Limit it.
Rory, Penny, thank you so much for having gone through the papers with us. Now, the countdown has officially begun for NASA's first manned mission to the moon in more than half a century. Artemis II is expected to launch on Wednesday from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. NASA staff have been holding a news briefing in the last half hour.
The vehicle's ready, the system is ready, the crew is ready, and behind this flight stands a campaign. Landings, a lunar base, a nuclear propulsion into deep space. That begins, not ends, with what happens on Wednesday evening. I have complete confidence in this team and the NASA workforce. For everybody else, 53 years ago, humanity left the moon and did not return. Now we go back. The great challenges of the last century will run not in the command centers alone, but in our factories, where the industrial might of free nations built the instruments of progress. This challenge of expanding the frontier will be won the same way, by the craftsmen, the engineers, and the industries of free nations building together what no nation can build alone.
Well, our science correspondent Thomas Moore is in Cape Canaveral in Florida and sent us this update.
The countdown has officially started for the first moon rocket launch with astronauts on board in more than 50 years. The Artemis rocket is poised on the launch pad just over 3 miles away, and engineers and launch controllers are at their desks working through the 800 steps needed to bring it to life. batteries to charge, electrical systems to power up, and 2.75 million litres of fuel to pump into the tanks. The astronauts are still in quarantine to reduce the chances of them falling ill on the 10-day mission. It's only when there's 4 hours to go that they'll clamber into the capsule and put on their helmets. The clock could stop at any point if there's a technical glitch or if the weather takes a turn for the worst, if the clouds come in, or even if there's rain. With lives at stake, NASA will be cautious. But fingers crossed, the countdown gets to 0 and the rocket heads for the moon.
Thomas Moore reporting there. Penny, you confessed that you're a bit of a space nerd. Tell us why we should be excited about this.
Well, this is progress of humanity stuff. I mean, it is really important, and there'll be so much science and discovery that come off the back of this mission. It is going to be an extremely testing time. I mean, they all look so calm, just going. Amazing professionals going about their job, but so many things can go wrong between now and the launch. I have been involved in, as a bystander, I hasten to add, with a satellite launch, Skynet 5, from French Guiana, and being there in the run-up for the. I mean, it's just so stressful. All the tests that to be done, it can be switched off even seconds before the button is sort of pushed. So I just find it incredibly exciting, and they're amazingly brave people.
Yeah.
It's and it's great to see a crewed mission back on again.
Or are you tempted? Would you
rocket going up at the time that jet fuel is now an increasingly short supply.
There is that. Don't tell them.
I would be absolutely terrified. I mean, you spoke quite about the bravery. I mean, I think it's easy to, because sort of heroes, and we've seen the films, but as individuals, the bravery of going, sitting on top of going up, obviously vertically further than anyone else gone before, round the side of the. I mean, I met Neil Armstrong, who was asked me what I think about Neil Armstrong. Ask me how Neil Armstrong was.
How was Neil Armstrong?
Very down to earth. And he got back. But I mean, it's the old phrase, I would no sooner do that than fly to the moon. But they are flying to the moon. And I just think, I think the bravery, and also they often say they look back and they see that beautiful vision of, and if you've ever felt more homesick in your life, thinking, how are we going to get back down? Because you can't trust gravity to do its job. And you must think, I hope nothing goes wrong. And I think, obviously, as he says, fingers crossed. You think, well, slightly more than fingers crossed,
well, yeah, and it was interesting in a lot of the news conferences leading up to it. NASA always reminds, everyone that safety is paramount, obviously, because, accidents have happened in the past, and it should be on Wednesday. So it should sort of happen about 11:30ish Wednesday, but they'll try again Thursday, I think, and Friday as well, depending on when they can actually launch. Right, coming up, 60 years after his first visit, he's back. Arnold Schwarzenegger's return to Belfast next.
Mr. Hexton, does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve?
Did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions.
David Cameron says that you should vote through funding for Ukraine. What do you say to that?
I really don't care what David Cameron has to say.
When you said you were from Sky News, I just got very excited.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody? I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits. Still,
we were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile. It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of
as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Roger and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Arnold Schwarzenegger said he would be back, and today, decades after he visited Belfast as a bodybuilder, he returned to the city. The actor-turned-politician was first in Belfast in 1966, nearly 20 years before he starred in Terminator, and today he was back to receive an honorary degree from Ulster University rather than to flex his muscles.
To me, this is very meaningful because, like the Chancellor said, that 60 years ago, I came to Belfast the first time. 60 years ago. Think about that. I mean, I know the majority of people in here were not alive then, but I'm just trying to tell you, this is really an anniversary for me, 60 years later to come back here. But I said then already, I'll be back. You see what I'm saying?
Good line, good line. Oh, we love Arnie. Penny, what do you think?
Oh, I think it's great. It's great that he was there. He's getting an honorary doctorate for his public service. And I think he's a great man. I think he is always trying to present a positive perspective on whatever is going on in the world. And I think he's a role model for particularly young men who have a lot of other choices for role models they can go to, which are distinctly less wholesome. And he's always talking about, you know, working hard, believing in yourself, being kind to others, deepening your understanding about what's going on in the world. Yeah. So I've got a lot of time for him. I think he's a good chap.
I agree. Well, not just one great career, but two.
He just knew he was going to say, "I'll be back."
Yeah, well.
It's a great look, though, with the dark hair and the white beard. And so there was a conductor once who had a black moustache and white hair, and they said, "How come your moustache is white and your hair is black?" He said, he said, "That's because the hair on my head has not had the same experiences." But I mean, it's a great look, isn't it? Extraordinary.
A bit like Santa. Santa meets the Terminator.
That's the one,
He played Mr. Freeze, didn't he? He looks like he's still got half his makeup on.
What was the Christmas film? He did a Christmas film, didn't he? What was that one? I can't remember.
Oh, I forget. Jingle All the Way, I'm being told in my ear.
Jingle
by the producer.
I'll be back with my sack.
Well, OK, now, time for a quick look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, the coming week will be changeable and often cloudy, but it's looking fairly warm tomorrow and on Wednesday. There'll be a mostly mild, rather murky and locally damp start tomorrow, but it will be chillier where skies were clear in parts of the east, with frost possible in places. The morning will slowly brighten, but it will stay mostly cloudy with 1 or 2 light showers likely. It will be warmer than today, with temperatures generally a little above average, but it will stay windy in the northwest. Now, the afternoon will see sunny spells developing widely, especially across the south and the east, where a few showers are likely. There'll be little change otherwise. Scotland will see prolonged locally heavy rain spreading from the northwest on Wednesday, while Ireland, Northern Ireland and Northern England can expect more outbreaks.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
And coming up on the wrap, the Prime Minister calls on business leaders for help with the economic impact of the war in Iran. Stay with us.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report, and this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live.
They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Tonight on The Wrap, Starmer appeals for help. He tells business leaders summoned to Downing Street that the government cannot tackle the economic fallout from the Iran war by itself.
This is going to have to be a joint effort. The government can't do it on its own. You can't do it on your own. We're going to have to work together on this, which is why I wanted to have the conversation here.
A British couple detained in Iran on spying charges tell Sky News that they need the Prime Minister to intervene to get them out.
Tell me, Mr. Keir Starmer, what exactly are you doing? Why can't you take control of this situation and free two innocent people?
Another scandal at the BBC as Radio 2 DJ Scott Mills is sacked over his personal conduct. Can the corporation keep surviving crisis after crisis? Plus, the final countdown. NASA begins the last phase of preparations for its first manned mission to the moon in half a century. We will discuss the day's biggest stories with Dame Penny Mordaunt and Rory Bremner. Plus, we're going to take a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's papers, including coverage of the BBC's sacking of Scott Mills. Good evening, Penny, Rory, welcome to you both. A Downing Street War Summit this afternoon saw the Prime Minister asking business leaders for help in minimising the economic impact of the Iran war on the UK. Rory, let me start with you. What is your initial thought on this?
I think they should do this every month, actually. I don't know. In a crisis, I think although quite what a conversation you can have with this many people round the table, or how long the meeting was. But I don't think it's a bad idea for a Prime Minister to have a number of people from different industries just in his ear for once a month or so. I mean, I don't know how regularly they do this. This is just a crisis meeting, but we seem to have a crisis quite regularly, so we should have a meeting quite regularly.
We do. Penny?
Well, I agree with that. I think government should be much more focused on what life is like for businesses. And these guys have been dealing with this for some time. I have to say, I do think this meeting has all the hallmarks of do something so we can hang a press release off the back of it. But if he really wants to help businesses, whether it's those directly affected by this crisis, as he's had in the room, or indirectly, then he's got to look at modernising some regulation on them and stop piling taxes on. And that's the way to help the consumer.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer told the bosses of some of the country's biggest energy, shipping and finance firms that the government could not shoulder all of the burden of the problems facing people across the country.
Probably uppermost in their minds at the moment is energy bills, petrol, and also food prices. This is going to have to be a joint effort. The government can't do it on its own. You can't do it on your own. We're going to have to work together on this, which is why I wanted to have the conversation here.
Meanwhile, the RAC said today that petrol and diesel prices have reached levels unseen since the end of 2022. It says the cost of filling up a family car is now more than £10 higher than at the start of the Iran war, which was just a month ago. So how serious is the situation? How reliant are we on imports? Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has been looking at the numbers.
Now, if you've been to one of these recently, to your local petrol station, you probably noticed two things. First of all, petrol prices have gone up a lot. Secondly, diesel prices seem to be going up much faster than petrol prices, raising the question, why is that? Well, first of all, you're right. Look, this is petrol prices just recently. They have gone up pretty sharply. But look at diesel. We're going back a few years here. Look at diesel prices. They are up even more sharply. So diesel's up 28%, petrol up 15%. So it's basically double the speed of the increase. This story is kind of a slightly long-winded story, but it kind of begins in a way with this man, Gordon Brown, when he was Chancellor, and a policy he announced to basically encourage people to buy diesel cars. It was kind of a tax break in 2002. But also this, the refineries in the UK and the fact that quite a lot of them have shut down. So those two things together, on top of the war, help explain what's going on right now. So first to Gordon Brown. So a few years ago, kind of back at the turn of the millennium, the vast majority of cars that people were buying were petrol cars. Then Gordon Brown brought in these tax changes that basically encouraged people to buy diesel cars. Everyone thought they were better for the environment. And then look what happens. The red line is diesel. Diesel kind of car purchases went up and up and up, actually to be higher than petrol by about 2015. Then everyone realised, oh, it turns out actually maybe diesel cars aren't quite so good for the environment. Dieselgate happened. And then you can see the diesel line went down. But the key thing about this is, as a result of that, there are quite a lot of diesel cars in the UK, partly because of tax policy going back years and years and years. We were encouraged to buy them. And the other thing to note is, well, we've got all these refineries in the UK, but most of them are designed primarily to make petrol. So they take crude oil and turn it into petrol. And also, they've been starting to shut down. So even last year, that was refineries a few years ago, last year, Grangemouth and Lindsey refineries shut down. So now we only have 4 of them left. And you put those two things together and look at how much petrol we're making versus how much we need. Basically, the line, anything above the line shows we're making more than 100% of what we need domestically. Petrol, we are kind of self-sufficient, technically self-sufficient. You know, we do bring in a fair bit and export a fair bit, but self-sufficient for petrol. But for diesel, we used to be. But then, look, fewer refineries, more demand, and that line went down. That's the key point. We're dependent on imports for diesel. This is where we used to get our imports from, most of them from Russia. Obviously, that's changed with sanctions coming in. But now, most of it comes from the US. But the key thing to note is this. Look, if we look at the breakdown of where we're getting diesel from, 12% of it comes from the Gulf. That's a problem now, obviously. You've got countries like Belgium and the Netherlands, their refineries there, they're dependent on the Gulf as well. They're taking the oil from the Gulf and refining it. And then you've got somewhere like India, which is actually getting a lot of oil from Russia. So you see, kind of 60%, actually more than 60% of these areas that we typically get diesel from are affected by what's going on right now, affected by geopolitics. So put all of that together and it helps explain why it's really tight for all fuels at the moment, but particularly for diesel.
And we're joined by our political correspondent, Alexandra Rogers. And Alexandra, you spent pretty much all day outside of Downing Street talking about this meeting. What sense did you get of the mood or just how worried the Prime Minister is?
Well, I think the fact that he's convened all of these top bosses to come into Downing Street shows that the government is worried about it. But at the same time, they are trying to project a message of calm. They don't want people to panic. They want people to keep buying fuel. They want people to keep booking their Easter and summer holidays. So there's maybe a bit of a juxtaposition between what's going on behind closed doors and what they're saying to the public. And I think the main thing they probably wanted from this meeting was to reassure the public and show that they are taking action. But obviously, if it was hearing from the Conservatives, they don't think that goes far enough. Kemi Badenoch saying, you know, instead of convening all these meetings, why don't you take further action to lower people's energy bills, whether that be scrapping VAT or green levies or scrapping the fuel hike that's planned for September.
OK. Penny, I mean, this balance that I guess the Prime Minister is trying to strike, reassuring the public, but also while being seen to be doing something.
I think they will be wanting to reassure the public because what you don't want is panic buying, and that just exacerbates all the logistic problems that you've got. But, I mean, they should be, even if we weren't having this conflict, they should be trying to reduce the cost of energy. It's the answer to the government, every problem that government's got. Costs in the NHS, helping businesses grow. And clearly there's a lot of division between the government and my party about how to approach that. But I think the real message coming out of this is you have to invest in your defence, your resilience at home. And we've not done that as a nation to the degree that we need to. And that is showing up now because we've got key capabilities that could be really helpful in keeping the straits open, for example, and giving shipping that confidence that it can have a go at getting through. We don't have those capabilities there anymore. And so I hope people are focused on the immediate crisis, but they're also starting to realise that they have to recalibrate on defence and resilience at home.
You were Defence Secretary under, was it Theresa May? But did you have that argument in Cabinet?
I have had it in public, Rory. In fact, if you go to my Twitter feed and look at the top, I have made a little collage exactly to answer this question. In public, in private, on the back bench, on the front bench, I have argued in public for more to be spent on defence and for us doing things in a smarter way, taking ships up from trade, for example, so that the risk sits in the private sector, but government can have a call on those vessels. I've said it every week for the last 20 years, and I'm afraid I'm coming to the conclusion that it is going to take a tragedy, either our own armed forces being killed or British civilians being killed before this country wakes up. It's incredibly serious now.
I mean, the point that Keir Starmer has made repeatedly is that it's not his war. It wasn't a war of his choosing. It was, Israel and the United States. And interestingly, today we heard from Caroline Levitt, the White House press spokesperson at the briefing in the White House. Let's take a quick listen to what she said.
Permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions and stop acting as the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. If the Iranians reject this golden opportunity, the greatest military in the history of the world continues to stand by to provide President Trump with every option available to ensure this regime continues to pay a grave price. One way or another, Iran will no longer have the credible ability to threaten the United States or our allies, which is, of course, the overall objective and mission the president set out when he launched Operation Epic Fury.
Rory, I mean, the usual language that we see come out of the White House, I mean, Donald Trump talking about obliterating power plants in Iran, and Caroline Levitt here, a once-in-a-generation chance to have a deal.
Yeah, I mean, you just wonder which of the war aims has been achieved so far, because, ballistic missiles, and Iran is still able to launch missiles, apparently, at will. Regime change, well, the extraordinary thing about the Iranian regime is it's sort of metastasised, and they're saying now that the Islamic Republican Guard has just spread out across the country. So there's so much that was just unforeseen, really. And I mean, this war is getting hugely expensive, and it's not going very well.
Penny, do you think that Keir Starmer is handling Donald Trump in the right way, if handling Donald Trump in the right way is possible?
I think the one thing that I do regret that's happened with regard to that relationship, it's really about the people of the United States, because I do think it's not good if the people of the US think that we are not on their side, that we're not there for them. We always have been. And whether it's our armed forces or business, that relationship is really strong. But I would loathe that sort of rhetoric, which has been assisted by the president. If that starts to take hold amongst the public, I think that would be really damaging. So what I hope maybe in the coming days is perhaps the Prime Minister could do a bit more to remind people of what we are doing actually every day together, particularly with our armed forces.
So in light of that, Alexandra, what are the plans for the Prime Minister tomorrow?
So we know that he's holding a COBRA meeting tomorrow morning. We're not sure who's attending other than cabinet ministers. And we had one quite recently where Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, was in attendance. So clearly the government's trying to keep everything under review in terms of how it keeps responding to the impact the war's having on the economy.
Okay, Alexandra, thank you. Now, well, caught up in the middle of the war are a British couple who've been imprisoned in Iran for more than a year on spying charges. And tonight they've told Sky News that the Prime Minister must intervene in their case. Craig and Lindsay Foreman, who deny the charges, have been speaking to my colleague Sarah Jane Mee.
Kind of start getting used to the noises of the various missiles and bombs that hit, and you always worry when you feel them and the vibrations.
Lindsay, what has life been like in the prison since war broke out? Have you been treated any differently?
There are those that support the action, support the war, perhaps support the British, and there's those that don't, and it's bringing out the Iranian nationalism, so it's my perception that I think there is more animosity towards the British, and that being me, than there was before the war. So I made my peace with death within maybe 48 hours of the reality of the bombs hitting and the fact that we could be struck, and that I've led a good life.
It's, since the war, it's the tensions within the salon here have, heightened, and I was snoozing earlier and got woken up by yet another fight, so the fights are becoming daily.
With rising anti-West sentiment in the prison, do you get the sense that that is growing and you could well be a target?
Could be. You never know. Like I say, you can't predict the war, and you can't predict what's going to happen within these walls. So,
on your family's behalf, what would you like to ask the Prime Minister? What would you like to say to him?
Tell me, Mr. Keir Starmer, what exactly are you doing? Why can't you take control of this situation and free two innocent people.
Well, we have had a response from Downing Street to that interview, and it says we have made it clear that Craig and Lindsay's incarceration is unjustified and appalling. Officials and diplomats have been providing consular assistance, and the ambassador to Tehran has visited them in prison. We will continue to work to safely return them to the UK, with the Foreign Secretary meeting their family to show our support. Penny, I mean, you know, we did interviews with them before the start of the war, so it was a terrible situation anyway. Now it's so much worse, and you heard there from Lindsay saying that she feels the anti-Western, anti-British sentiment rising.
Yes, I mean, their ordeal is bad enough. The government isn't using the term hostage, and there might be very good reasons for that, but they are hostages, and they are not able to protect themselves in this environment. They are stuck in one place, incarcerated, and they clearly can feel bombs crashing all around them. I think it is a terrible ordeal for them and their loved ones, and also it will be preying on their mind that the regime will potentially use them as human shields. I mean, I wouldn't put that past them. So pretty grim, and they're clearly mentally preparing themselves for the worst.
I think she said it. She said as much. She said, I think that the threat of death doesn't worry me anymore, something along those lines.
I think it's quite interesting because obviously, as Sarah Jane said, he was having a very bad day. And I think it's interesting, she's a psychologist, so I think she has a few more tools in her locker, as it were. She will have, you know, in terms of mental strength or mental ways of dealing with it. But I think it's an unimaginably dreadful situation, as you can imagine as well, with bad enough in normal circumstances, but with a war raging around you. And I mean, that will give her some strength, but he's clearly struggling. But what they want is for the government to actually state their innocence publicly. And actually, they didn't really in that one. They sort of said, well, you know, it was an appalling act, but I think they clearly they need our help.
Yeah, well, certainly a story that we're going to keep on monitoring here on Sky News. Now, the BBC is facing another crisis. The Radio 2 presenter, Scott Mills, has been sacked over allegations about his personal conduct. The radio DJ, who also presents some of the corporation's Eurovision coverage, had been the BBC's 11th highest paid star. Well, here's how BBC Radio 2 presenter Jeremy Vine reacted to the sacking of Scott Mills this lunchtime.
It's Jeremy Vine here, BBC Radio 2. Obviously, I was taken aback by that opening story to the news. I had not heard anything about it until 17 minutes ago when it was on the BBC website, and I only have the information that was given to you in the bulletin. I have nothing more, that it was allegations about Scott Mills's personal conduct which have led to him being sacked. I have no more than that.
Rory, what have you made of what we know? And it has to be said, we don't know the details of the allegations.
I was just going to say, we know no more than that, rather. We do know the BBC seems to have acted quickly. In the past, they've been criticised for acting too slowly. What surprises me is, I think this happened sort of six days ago, and we still haven't had a statement from Scott Mills, which is surprising because in the absence of a statement, people are going to speculate like mad, and all we know is it's something historic. But I do think, you know, he needs to get ahead of the story in some way, and we need some kind of an explanation or some kind of statement. Otherwise, speculation will just run riot.
Yeah, and Penny, on some of the papers, it does say, you know, another crisis for the BBC. Do you think that's unfair, that actually a corporation that big, so many presenters, so many stars, you're going to get cases like this?
I think that the criticism will be short-lived because it looks like they've dealt with this swiftly. I mean, the Mail is running that it was the outgoing DG that actually did this, and he just wanted to clear the decks for the new person coming in. So I think criticism will be short-lived, and media attention will turn to trying to find out the story behind why he was sacked.
Okay.
We also have to be careful because, you know, there is the thing about innocence before proved guilty. Because Paul Gambaccini, when this happened, he went through a year of hell. It cost him sort of $200,000 in legal fees, and he was ultimately proved to be innocent. But that, again, it comes back to we simply don't know, and so all sorts of things are going around Twitter. But it's
like you said, we haven't had a statement from him.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're going to leave it there. Coming up, we're going to hear from Cape Canaveral, where the countdown has begun for the next moon mission.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The countdown has officially begun for NASA's first crewed mission to the moon in over half a century. Artemis II is expected to launch on Wednesday from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. 4 astronauts will fly around the moon during their 10 days in space. Well, one of America's key goals with the Artemis mission is to colonize the moon before its rivals do, as Sky's Tom Clark now explains.
NASA is sending humans back to the moon. They'll go faster and further than ever before, but end up in the same place we went more than 50 years ago. So why spend billions and risk lives to do it all again? Well, the real goal is colonising the moon before the competition, and the race is on.
2, 1, boosters in ignition, and liftoff of Artemis I.
That was the launch of Artemis I in 2022, an uncrewed test of the world's most powerful rocket and its Orion spacecraft. Now comes Artemis II, a test of the same hardware, but with humans in the loop. The crew will blast off from Florida, performing safety and systems checks in a low Earth orbit. If all's OK, the propulsion system will boost them higher, where Orion will then separate, performing a final high Earth orbit before something called a translunar injection burn boosts them on a 4-day trip to the moon. After 5 days in space, Orion goes behind the moon, temporarily blocking communication with Earth. They'll then use the moon's gravity to help fling them all the way back to Earth and a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Astronauts on Apollo 8 made the same journey in 1968, capturing the first, now iconic, Earthrise image. Artemis II will take far better pictures than these and a wider orbit, sending their crew further from Earth than any humans in history. And they'll face new risks too. Re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, they'll be travelling faster than humans have ever been, exposing their spacecraft to temperatures 3 times hotter than lava. And the crew is different too. Its commander is NASA astronaut Reed Wiseman. Orion's pilot, Victor Glover, will become the first person of colour to go to the moon. His NASA colleague, Christina Cook, becomes the first woman in lunar orbit, and Jeremy Hansen of the Canadian Space Agency, the first non-American to make the journey. But they are boldly going where man has gone before. At the point of this test flight, NASA insists, is a small step towards people on the lunar South Pole, where frozen water could support a moon base. The fact China plans to send a crew there by 2030 has put a rocket up the US agency.
A great competition with a rival that has the will and the means to challenge American exceptionalism across multiple domains, including in the high ground of space. This is not the time for delay, but a time for action. Because if we fall behind, if we make a mistake, we may never catch up, and the consequences could shift the balance of power here on Earth.
If all goes to plan, next year, Artemis III will go into Earth orbit to perform tests on more mission hardware, including a human landing system. If that works, the landing vehicle will go to the moon on Artemis IV to put the first ever astronauts on the lunar South Pole in 2028. NASA has also announced a highly ambitious plan to scale up robotic missions to the moon, targeting 1 a month, to start construction of a lunar base at the South Pole, with future plans for up to 2 crewed missions a year to staff the base. So the race is really on, but it depends on major long-term funding and no mishaps. It's not just 4 astronauts riding on Artemis II, but America's hopes for dominance in space.
Tom Clark there. It does look amazing. And Penny, the space race used to be with the Soviets, obviously, and now it's the Chinese. What have you made of it all?
Well, I think it's really good that we've got NASA doing this. We've always seen a lot of private sector companies forging ahead with the commercialisation of space travel and all these things. But you know, this is what we want NASA to do, and it's fantastic that it is sending. This is a crewed mission. China is ahead on about 37 out of 45 technologies that are tracked. But this is one area where the US has the edge, and you can see why they've got this impetus there now. They do see it as competition, and that's good, because this is what we should be doing. This is the stuff that takes humanity forward. I would remind you that just a short while ago, the US president was going to pull the plug on a lot of these things. So I'm just hoping that
if it doesn't go ahead on Wednesday.
He's still supporting it by Wednesday. But I mean, also just salute everyone involved, and particularly the crew. This is, I mean, safety first. They're incredibly professional, but it's a flaming dangerous thing to do. And
terrifying, I would think.
I wish them well, and hope they all return safely.
They're so brave. It's a great 2 fingers to Iran, isn't it? Showing America that we've still got oil to burn. You can literally sort of people saying, I can't afford to fill up my Kia Sportage, and they got that thing going up to me. Seriously, we can get a crew to the moon, but we can't get a crew through the Straits of Hormuz.
And look at that. Those are live pictures of the rocket on the launch pad. Meant to take off on Wednesday, I think about 11:30ish local time, there, Cape Canaveral. Will you be watching, Rory?
Yes, I mean, I think it is. It's one of those. It's one of those moments, isn't it? It's It's incredible to think what we were doing 50 years ago, isn't it? And you think about Concorde, and we've had nothing to rival Concorde since then in terms of supersonic air travel. And, nothing, I mean, there've been Mars missions, but in terms of, manned missions to the moon, that it was 50 years ago and now going back. It's extraordinary that we're doing that long ago and nothing in the meantime.
Yeah. Well, a lot of, I think, exploration towards Mars. We've been talking about Mars more than the moon recently, Penny.
Yes, and this is clearly with a view to setting up a base there. I mean, what they will be flying through will look very different than it did 50 years ago. I mean, the amount of stuff that's up there now...
well, it was in black and white, then it'll be in colour.
Yeah, the images will be that too. OK, we're going to have to leave it there, hoping that it will take off on Wednesday as scheduled. Time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's papers. Well, the Eye has comments from the Prime Minister urging business leaders to help limit the economic fallout of the Iran war. That's on its front page. The Express reports on calls for the government to help tackle rising fuel costs as a result of the conflict in the Middle East. The Times says the war has led to an additional £20 million a day being paid in energy tax. The Guardian leads on threats from US President Donald Trump to, quote, obliterate Iran's power plants if they do not agree to peace terms soon. The Mail reports on the sacking of radio DJ Scott Mills from the BBC, calling it another crisis for the corporation. That story also makes the front page of The Sun, following his firing over his personal conduct. The Telegraph says the Prime Minister has issued a 48-hour ultimatum to doctors, saying if they don't call off the planned strikes, then 4,000 new jobs will be axed. The Metro has the story of a man who died after blowing up his own home following an £80 increase to his rent. It's an extraordinary story. And the Financial Times reports on a French AI startup raising funds to build more data centres across Europe. OK, well, let's take a look at some of these stories in more details with our guests. Rory, if I can start with you. On the front page of The Express, I mean, obviously, we've been looking at the impact that the Middle East war, the Iran war, is having on consumers here, whether it's, the food inflation that we might see or the price of fuel, petrol and diesel. And now here, The Express saying Labour urged to help Britain's drivers and to do it now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think if they can afford to do it now because, as we said, Rachel Reeves has got a 20 billion shortfall, although, interestingly, they were saying that during this recent crisis that they've got a windfall on, because if there's more charges for petrol, they get more tax. But already, Howard Davis was saying, I think, this morning, that the markets are charging the government more for their... to lend the government money. And I think we're paying more interest than Greece, I think, now. We're being charged more. So our old friends, the markets, are sort of beginning to doubt quite how much our economy can stand.
Yeah. Your view on that, Penny, and also front page of the Times, extraordinary number there. War brings in a £20 million a day extra in energy taxes.
Yeah, I mean, we are in a fragile state, and whether it's helping people with the cost of living or alleviating some of the pressures on business or funding defence properly, your plan has to include how to deal with the debt that we're carrying at the moment. The problem that the government's got is even if they come up with a plan to do that and to make savings elsewhere on welfare and things like that, the Prime Minister can't get his MPs to vote for it. And that was in part because he didn't bake that into their manifesto. There was nothing on welfare reform, for example. So we know, because he's tried it, his MPs won't vote for it. So we're sort of paralysed at the moment, and there is an increasing head of steam from parliamentarians across the political divide for the deficit in the defence budget to be addressed, in part because of what's going on. And I think that they're scrabbling around in number 10 and 11 to try and work out what to do about that. But that's what needs to happen. It's very clear what needs to happen, and there's polling been done and published last week to show that the public are actually ahead of the government on this issue.
Do you agree, Boyd?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, I think that the Times sets it out quite well, that looks like the government are getting in more money from this, but at the same time borrowing is costing more, which is wiping that out. I mean, who would want to be the Chancellor now?
No. I mean, the focus had been all on cost of living crisis at the start of the year, and then, of course, all of this happened. And
yes, and I think business as well. But, I mean, you know, where the Prime Minister is right is that business is the only thing that can get us out of this. That's the only driver of growth that we have. And if you have more sensible regulation, that's equivalent to tax cuts for business. And so they've got to listen to business making very reasonable asks. Things that would really help industry. I mean, on defence, for example, we don't have any test ranges. If they just did that, that would save British businesses enormous amounts of money who are having to test things elsewhere in the world, and it would build our resilience at home as well. So, lots of things like that could be done with the stroke of a pen. In Whitehall, they need to focus on that and get it done.
Well, there's a COBRA meeting tomorrow morning, I think, of the Prime Minister, so we'll see if anything might come out of that. Let's take a look at some of the other stories still related to war, very different angle. I think it's page 10 of the Eye. Dubai police targeting British expats over drone strike pictures. Now, there were a lot of stories when the war first broke. Not people having enormous empathy with a lot of the influencers, so-called, that were stuck in Dubai, who started posting on social media. But now Dubai police very much making it clear that doing that is actually illegal, to represent the country badly.
Yeah, I think they obviously they don't want the impression given that it's a dangerous place to be. I mean, I've spoken to friends in Dubai. They say, "Oh, it's perfectly okay." And I said, "Hang on, the drone has just flown past your window." But obviously, they kind of want to limit the impression that Dubai is a war zone. But I mean, there's so many other parts of the Middle East as well. I mean, for a lot of friends in Bahrain, and I think you were saying in Bahrain that there's curfews.
Yes, there's a maritime curfew from about 6 at night to 4 in the morning, which includes even local fishermen, and it's changing quite dramatically. But I have to say, this kind of headline is likely to be more off-putting, I think, for example, to most Brits than bombs dropping near them. I do think they just need to kind of get this in perspective.
Yeah. OK, let's move on to a story that's in a lot of the papers. That's Scott Mills, Radio 2 DJ, sacked over claims about his conduct. Rory, we haven't had a statement from him, and we don't know the details of the allegations. A lot of the papers writing it up as yet another crisis for the BBC.
Yeah, people love to have a stick to beat the BBC with. I mean, as I said, they've got over 22,000 employees. I wonder how many other organisations that have that many employees there are.
And so many programmes and presenters.
Yeah, exactly. And because they're high profile, where there is a scandal, I mean, and that's not to downplay it, because, as I say, in the case of Greg Wallace or Hugh Edwards, Jimmy Savile, of course, sort of a decade or more ago, not to downplay the seriousness of that. But I think these are individuals, leave Scott Mills out of it for the moment because we don't know what was going on, but these are individuals, and I think it's often an agenda by people who would actually like to see the BBC broken up or in some way. But in this particular case, we can only wait and see, and I think the BBC has tried to learn from its mistakes. We've got a new Director General coming in, I think just next week, and I think they've tried to act quickly where they've in the past been criticised for acting too slowly. But last time when they went big on Cliff Richard, they got sued because they thought, oh, right, okay, we're going to put it right, we're going to cover all this, and so it's a difficult line to take, and time will tell whether they took the right action this time.
Yes, I mean, historically they've done very badly. I mean, that incident, they were accusing someone of pursuing them for something that they hadn't done, whilst having people on their payroll that were doing all sorts of very bad things. So absolutely, they have not covered themselves in glory in the past. I think most of that criticism with these previous incidents has been about how they have responded when they found out, how slow they were, the fact people were given big payoffs or put on gardening leave whilst investigations are going on. This seems to be different in it. We don't know all the facts behind it, but they seem to have dealt with it swiftly. Credit to the outgoing DG that he could have probably left this to someone else coming in. We said, no, I'm going to, leave the decks clear, and so I think this story will move from criticism of the BBC to pursuing the story behind Scott Mills. It seems that the Beeb has done a better job than it has in the past.
And there doesn't yet seem to be from social media, so oh, well, we knew what was going on and we know about this and there's so many stories and at the moment it seems to be an isolated incident, but it's too early to say, of course.
And we'll see if and when he releases a statement. And we're going to take a quick break. We'll take a look at more top stories after that.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Welcome back. Let's take a closer look now at some of the stories making tomorrow's papers. If we look at The Guardian front page, the headline here, Penny, small boats deal close to collapse over safety fears. And this, of course, is the UK's agreement with France to patrol the coast to stop a lot of the small boats arriving to the UK. Tell us more about this.
Well, look, I think this was inevitable, really. The problem that this government and previous governments have had is they've focused on France's northern border. And actually, if you wanted a proper returns deal with the UK, you would have to give France something that is meaningful to France. And so focusing on the northern border is no use. If Britain said, we're going to help you with your southern border and we're going to stop the problem coming into your country, but in exchange for that, anyone that comes here from France is returned. That's the sort of framework you need to be in. Yeah. The notion that you can you know, I mean, if you think policing the Straits of Hormuz is difficult, I can tell you that the Navy actually, people don't think the Navy's done a lot. The Navy did a lot of work to see what it could do to stop crossings, and it is incredibly difficult and it's incredibly dangerous. So I think, you know, we need to stop focusing on just having a deterrent. We need to actually treat this like a military operation. We need to talk to France about its southern border.
But that would mean having a pan-European approach to the whole issue.
Yeah, yeah, it would. And actually, I've done a lot of work on this. I've spent a lot of time in the Mediterranean, in Libya, looking at migrant flows and what is actually effective in stopping them. And it does require cooperation. It requires a realism about this. It's not in France's interest to help them on their northern border. Therefore, they're not going to help do what you would like them to do in return. You've got to actually focus on what's going to be effective.
I think it's even more global. I don't know why there has not been a global conference on this, because it is such a large issue, because you've got a global south where there have been levels of migration that's not been seen ever, I think. So you've got a global south which is migrating because of war and climate change, and you've got a northern Europe with an ageing population that needs a workforce either in social care or in agriculture. And somehow or other, I think I'm amazed that there hasn't been a really proper...
Well, quick plug on that. I chair the Coalition for Global Prosperity. We're starting a project to rewrite the Refugee Convention. So for the modern world where people have mobile phones.
OK, let's look at another story, just to get through a few before we have to go. The Times front page, world's unhappiest places are just so macho. Now, there's always this list, isn't there, of the happiest countries in the world, and invariably it's like Finland, Denmark, you know, Sweden, which I have to say I'm not too sure about. But apparently, the unhappiest ones, and you get to start this.
Do I?
Or if you do.
I've only just seen this.
Oh, really? Basically, yes. So countries where you have this prove your manhood culture tend to be more unhappy.
Why are you coming to me about
Penny,
well, I have read here, it says that the results can't prove cause and effect. So the research can't say that people are unhappy because they're being asked to be macho, or whether it's the other way around. I mean, actually, interestingly, a lot of countries which have younger populations and tend to have a more macho culture, they're the ones that get into difficulty, and that's obviously because of
the bit I love is here it says Britain was somewhere in the middle on both measures, neither especially macho nor especially unhappy.
That's
middle of the road.
Very British. The psychologists, they report that nations with a stronger prove your man culture. Yes.
OK, we have 1 minute. I've got a lovely story to end on. Celine Dion, who's returning to the stage for 10 shows in Paris, because of course she'd cancelled her world tour because of stiff person syndrome. But apparently she's back. It's great news. Celine Dion fans.
My tour will go on.
Yeah. She looks fabulous.
No, it is, and it is a terribly debilitating illness, and she's suffered terribly from it, and but has been actually very public about it. She's actually had a documentary crew film what happens to her when she is having one of these episodes. So great. I was actually listening to her in the car on the way up today. Oh, I can't remember, but it was. She's just an amazing talent, and it's good to see her back.
Yeah, she was. So 10 shows in Paris, if anyone wants to go and see it. Penny, Rory, thank you both so much. It's been great having you both to go through the papers with us. Thank you. And now, coming up, we'll have a look at the sport and this former Brighton boss, Roberto De Zerbi, next in line for the Tottenham Hotspur job. We'll have the latest coming up next.
Mr. Hexton, does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve?
Did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions.
David Cameron says that you should vote through funding for Ukraine. What do you say to that?
I really don't care what David Cameron has to say.
When you said you were from Sky News, I just got very excited.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody?
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits going in still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Let's get the latest sport now from Sky Sports News and David.
Did you have conversations with Rafa Benitez?
Yes, through his agent and a couple with Rafa. That's another reason he put me off. He started talking about me playing left back, which didn't sit nicely with me. I was just starting to play regularly in centre midfield for a few years, and he spoke about me being a bit more versatile. He didn't sell it too well.
After 4 bids, the latest thought to be £15 million, Liverpool insist they're still talking to Villa and have not made a final offer.
Liverpool put a bid in, which wasn't accepted by Mr. Lerner. Mr. Lerner went back to them and they didn't go through.
I don't think Villa were difficult, to be fair. They set a price and stuck to it in the absence of other deals. We didn't have the funding to complete it.
Once again, his relationship with the Anfield board is under scrutiny. The veto of Gareth Barry's transfer from Aston Villa prompted renewed suggestions Rafa Benitez enjoys less than full backing from Liverpool's owners. In response, the club have released this statement. It is obviously the selling club's prerogative to put whatever price they want on the player, but on this occasion, Liverpool think the price quoted is too high.
There were other priorities. One of Rafa's points was that Gareth was versatile, that he could play left back. The owners, which by that stage were Tom Hicks and George Gillette, pointed out we'd just spent quite a lot of money on De Sena, a left back. Unless we could raise some money, it was going to be too expensive, and then it became contingent on being able to sell Shabby, which didn't happen.
And Liverpool fans blame me for Alonso leaving, but not once did he say Alonso was going to be leaving.
Quite why there was no interest in Shabby is a bit of a mystery, because clearly he was a phenomenal player and a phenomenal talent. And we bought Robbie Keane the same time, of course. Seems like small numbers now, but we were looking at spending a net 20 million each season, so the funding just wasn't there.
Gareth became terribly disappointed with Liverpool. I think, to Gareth's astonishment, a couple of weeks later they paid £20 million for Robbie Keane.
I think that was a signal to Barry that, did you really want me that much?
When I knew the transfer was going to happen, I got my head down. There wasn't too many boos.
Who would have thought Gareth Barry's Villa career would come to this? Booed at every touch by the fans that once loved him.
It's got to face the music, really. You should leave, to be honest.
There were chants of Judas, booed every time he touched the ball.
It's been a long, long saga, really long. It's been talking about maybe 16, 17 weeks now. And of course, I think that some stage or another, it must affect you.
Mentally, it was a real tough period, and I regret doing some things.
I think he probably felt that he let himself down. I think he thought, I'm normally a more measured character than that, and I've dropped my guard, and look at the mess that it's got me into.
We let bygones be bygones. He came back. If he'd gone to Liverpool in the manner in which he did, he wouldn't have gone with my blessing. No, no. I would never have spoken to him again.
We all knew that if
And that's it for the wrap. Thank you for watching. Stay with us. All the top stories are coming up right here on Sky News. Good night. I'll see you tomorrow.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who is funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?